So one of the four presenters are online. One of them are online. One of them. Good morning, Professor Obi. Can you hear me, sir?
Good morning. I can hear you
sorry,
loud
good afternoon,
and
sir.
clear. Good afternoon. I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Please, you can start now. The floor is yours. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Good afternoon, colleagues, distinguished panelists, and our special guest of honor, Professor Olufunke Mojubaolu Okome, in whose honor we are calling this panel to order. The title of this panel is Security, Political Economy, Diaspora, and Activism, celebrating Olufunke Mojubaolu Okome, Part 2. My name is Cyril Obi, and I work for the Social Science Research Council. Unfortunately, I am not able to join you in person, so I'm joining you virtually from New York. But I assure you that I am there in your midst in spirit. The panelists for this session are as follows. Abiodun Adejumo of the University of Lagos, presenting on the role of ethnic associations in conflict resolution in Nigeria. Precious Chinecherem Idemado, University of Nigeria, Nsukka, presenting on the age grade and peacekeeping in Eza, Ebonyi State. Thirdly, we have Olusegun Oladele Igbo of Afe Babalola University, presenting on traditional security, unpacking the narratives of indigenous security mechanisms in Moba land. Then we have Jude Ikeji of the Federal University of Lafia, presenting on conflict of institutional reforms and identity reconstruction in Africa. And last but not the least, we have Kennedy Eboka and Esther Tonte of the University of Lagos, presenting on conflicts and ethnicity in Lagos, evidence from Idiaraba, which is also in Lagos. It gives me great pleasure to chair this session, which honors one of Nigeria's, and indeed the United States' distinguished scholars in the field of political science and international relations. Mojubaolu Olufunke Okome is a professor of political science at Brooklyn College, New York, and she is a sole author and/or editor of 7 books, including A Sapped Democracy, The Political Economy of Structural Adjustment Program and Political Transition in Nigeria, 1983 to 1993. She is a founder as well as editor of the peer-reviewed Irinkerido, a journal of African migration. She co-founded until 2010 edited Gender, Journal of African Culture and Women's Studies. She also co-founded Bring Back Our Girls, NYSC. As I mentioned earlier, Professor Okome is a highly distinguished scholar, but she's not just an armchair critic. She combines academic excellence with committed activism. She is very much at home in the classroom as she is in the field. She speaks her mind freely, but she's also very empathetic and supportive. I have encountered her and I know her personally. And I will tell you that this is one of our finest scholars to come out of Nigeria. She is a feminist but she is first and foremost a humane social scientist. And I think that it is really very commendable that the Lagos Studies Association has decided to honor this distinguished scholar. And on this note, I see people are still coming in, and I welcome them to this panel. And we shall go in the order that the papers are already arranged. To start us off this afternoon, we will be calling on Abiodun Adejumo of the University of Lagos to speak to the role of ethnic associations in conflict resolution in Nigeria. Dear sir, you have about 12 minutes to present your paper.
This is Abiodun here.
Yes.
Okay,
You know, the
okay.
internet is now cooperating.
Abiodun is in his university, so I assume that he will be there. He's home-based.
I'm sorry, sir. She's getting
Okay, so put it on there. If you have been developed by us,
yeah, we're already in a tight scope. So move on to the next person.
And you know, sometimes also, even though rules are outcomes, and you can just talk until we solve the technical issues. Well, men can't do two things at once. It's really I say that.
Yes.
Example.
No, my sons. And if my sons are doing something and you are talking to them, they'll say that you are trying to stabilize them. But you can't, 5 people can talk together, I say. Then nothing, no action. It's just field work.
Yeah, Dr. Adejumo, I believe that you are still grappling with technology.
It's ready now.
Slides are yes, sir.
It is ready now. That is good news. So please go ahead.
Good afternoon. From University of Lagos here. I'll be presenting the paper on the role of ethnic associations in conflict management in Nigeria. When we talk about Nigeria, the nation, the different ethnic groups that make up Nigeria of today live separately as autonomous groups before the advent of colonialism. So they had minimum contact with themselves. They have minimal contact with themselves during this period until the emergence of colonialism. The colonialists came, introduced their system. All of that, as Lord put it, colonialists deliberately introduced ethnicity into Nigeria with their various policies. And the beginning of this is the rural-urban migration. So to maintain their exploitation, the colonialists needed to build infrastructure, they needed to build rails, ports, and the likes to sustain their exploitation tendency. So for that, people need to move from the rural area to the urban centers. So apart from that, the introduction of tax means the British colonialists introduced the tax that must be paid with the British currency. Paying that to British currency means that the people will have to earn British currency So the people had to come to the urban centers where they can earn that currency and make good money for themselves. So that is the beginning of real contact for different groups in Nigeria. And that happened to be the beginning of ethnicity. That will be the beginning of ethnicity. So with that, followed closely is the introduction of representative democracy. With representative democracy, the people of different ethnic groups that came into the urban centers, into the urban areas, they had to rally around their own group. And the elites in their group had to pave way for them to have a better way in the urban area. So the contacts began. They started to make way for them to help them. So by the time representative democracy was introduced, it was easy for this set of elites to continue to rule them, to continue to be in their leader. And this continuation, they led to series of contracts because of centralization of power. The type of federalism that was imposed on Nigeria led to centralization of power, the concentration of power at the center. This led to struggle for the control of center because it is believed that once you are in control of the center, you bring back to your own region the goodies. That is what the elite stands as development. So the control of the center means it's going to run on your own people. Because of this, the elite weaponize ethnic differences. And it has been like that in every election. So there has always been series of struggle for the control of the center. This has led to struggle in Nigeria, and it has led to conflict all over Nigeria. It has led to series of conflicts. So the objective of this study, I'm going to be interrogating the peculiarities of ethnicity in the Nigerian democratic setting with the Fourth Republic in view, and I'll briefly assess the role of the ethnic association in the escalation of conflict in the Nigerian democratic state. I'm going to be looking at it from the view of the Fourth Republic as well. So I'm going to end it by looking at what should be the role of these ethnic associations in conflict management. What should be their role in conflict management in Nigeria? So the problem that propelled this thought is the fact that in the Fourth Republic, the mobilization along ethnic line has taken a dangerous dimension because of what is because of the perceived marginalization and subjugation of other ethnic groups. Once an ethnic group is in power, the ethnic group believes that the other ethnic group, those not in power, believe that the one in power is marginalizing them. So and the elite have been able to use this to cause conflict in the country. So I want to briefly review some works on ethnic association and ethnic conflict. So according to Ake talked about the personalization of state power by the ruling elite, and that has caused a lot of agitation among the people. It has caused a lot of marginalization. It has created struggle, and it has escalated the conflict in the Fourth Republic. The conflict that started just as a pocket of conflict in the Niger Delta to the southeast region has escalated to the point that now have conflict in every region of the country. So for the discussion, just in 2003, former President Obasanjo at his inauguration, because of the nature of election of that year, proclaimed ethnic politics as dead. But after 5 cycles of election, so we still discover that the same struggle is still there. So this is because the ethnic associations have turned themselves into lobbies for political appointments and other preferences at the federal level. So if you look at talking about the return to civil rule in 1999, the return to civil rule in 1999 was made possible by the consensus among different elites from different groups. So, and this was made possible by the agitation of the Afenifere, which was I use the word was because the Afenifere itself is already disintegrated. We have there was a time we have new whatever we need whatever. So that's why we use the word was. So the Afenifere made that possible, led by Abraham Adesoya. So the agitation there was that their own son was marginalized. Their own son was not given what was due to him. But the way when they coined the agitation, it was possible for others to buy into the agitation because they made it move beyond just fighting for the Yorubaris. They made it look as if beyond the Yorubaris, the military must relinquish power, which was the main thing then. Everybody wanted the military out of the way for the civil rule to come. So because of that, they were able to garner support from every other democratic group and the like. So they were able to gather support. And at the end of the day, there was consensus among various ethnic nationalities. This was possible because Afenifere didn't put political interest. It was not, the political interest then was not the most prominent. It was part of it, but it wasn't the prominent. The political aspect is the fact that they felt their son had been cheated. For now, beyond our son, you military must lead power. And they were able to push it. So they were able to resolve that because of the position of this Afenifere. But immediately after Nigeria returned to civil rule, the system reverted back to what it used to be before. And this ethnic group started mobilizing themselves against the Nigerian state. And this was because the leaders in power, personalized power, the personalized power, it created wide gap. The gap between the rulers and the ruled became wider. So it gave room for people to be able to rally, to be able to move rather ethnic associations again. They really need someone, they need an organization that will push for their agenda. And there's something about the elite. Whenever they lose out of power, losing out of power means their own group actually lost out of power, and they make sure they rally their people against whoever is in government. This actually created crisis of legitimacy in Nigerian states. Even as of today, you still have a group still agitating, Madam, my president, and the rest. It has been like that for a while. So the best way I feel the ethnic association can manage the conflict that is the conflict in Nigeria will be to revert back to their socio-cultural norms, their socio-cultural activities. They should, the associations have been more political than being socio-cultural. They now do more political work. All they want to do is just to lobby for their own people up there, leaving the socio-cultural aspect, which is the primary function of this group. Because if they're able to rally their people, if they're able to develop their people socio-culturally, they'll be able to negotiate well. And they focus on inclusiveness, they focus on how to grab the state power, whereas the Constitution has created room for inclusiveness in government with the federal character. The federal character principle is there, though those as I've said earlier, the personalization of power can actually make whoever is in power misuse power. But if each ethnic association can develop its own group socioculturally, you'll be able to develop your own group, you'll be able to negotiate. The whole country will be able to come together, just like they did in 1999, to be able to push for good governance, to be able to push for what is needed for the nation building, and not just the selfish interest. So I put it that ethnic associations will need to act better by playing the role of lobbyists for the whole Nigeria. They will need to not just their own group, because doing that means they are only after their own interest and not the interest of all. And that the nation building will be easier. In conclusion, so the competition has been intense. It's been intense. It has moved from pocket to violence to violence taking over the whole country.
What's the time?
We can actually spend the time if the ethnic association will focus more on the promotion of socio-cultural activities in their respective areas. That will thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adejumo, for taking us on a historical tour of ethnicity, or what you could describe as the politicization of ethnic identity and the politics of ethnic associations or groups. You have given us the history, you have given us what has happened, you have also focused on the conflict dynamics that tend to be propelled and sustained by ethnic associations as a mobilizing dynamic for politics. It's very interesting that after brilliantly outlining what you consider to be the trigger or the motivations of ethnic associations, which has won some of them political gains, you are now asking them to revert to social-cultural norms. But I believe that other participants would speak to some of these issues. You have also touched on something that Professor Okome has actually done a lot of work on, and I'm sure that since she's sitting next to you, she'll be whispering some of her very important insights into your ears. So be warned. Next to give the presentation would be Precious Chinecherem Edemadu, and she is from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Her presentation is on the age grade and peacekeeping in Eza, Ebonyi State. Dr. Edemadu, you can go ahead and make your presentation on Utuobo.
I'm sorry, I'm not a doctor.
You will be very soon.
Potential graduate student.
You are applying.
Oh, thank you. Excellent. He's a young child.
So my topic was 8th grade and peacekeeping in Ebonyi State. The introduction. In Eza, they call they call it industry or routine. So the research examines your 8th grade groups within this context and their crucial role in maintaining peace in this community. The study finds that what is they are served as a potent conflict resolution mechanism from pre-colonial time even till this contemporary period. But however, this age grade, this age grade, they are people in the same class of 3 to 5 years of age. So as they are growing, they have the older, the younger ones, and all this. So this age grade group, like, they are also affected based on gender, bias issues in most cases. So the next slide, please. So, but before then, before I'll go into, I want to tell us about the graceful organization of Izaland. Just like in Igbo society, and I believe in most other societies, we have the Umunna, that is the Council of Elders. We have the institution of Umuada, made up of wives, and like wives married to the family and the daughters. We have the age grade, which these are youths. Most times they are older men too. You know, as they are growing, they are the age grade, it has stages. So then we have the priests. The priests are like the gods, the eyes of the to the people they see through. Then the next slide, please. Then the research aims to address these questions. Number one is, what are the stages and criteria of attaining this membership in Izaland? In Izaland, before you are referred to an age grade or something, there is an initiation that it passes through. So, and each state have their own initiation and they have what they do. The next question was there any form of gender complementarity? And we'll see that in the course of the discussion. Then what were the measures taken to ensure peace in Izaland by these age graders? Were there any changes as a result of colonialism and Western influence? What does age grade look like after the encounter with the Western world? In that tradition, to attain any height as an age grader, one must follow the hierarchical order already laid by their forefathers, and as well perform the ritual rites that follows. So now these are the stages. The stage is indicated by their names in that dialect. We have the Oboibina. These ones are the oldest. I'll size more. They are the oldest. So, and they are the ones responsible for offering sacrifices, to the gods on behalf of other age graders. And then we have the Obo Inuas. We have the Obo Ogoma. The Obo Ogoma. They are the ones in charge of recruiting people for the army. Setting it up just like in the military or police, where they have those that will recruit, and those who they recruited are now the army, right? So these Obo Ogoma, they are the ones in charge of recruiting. Why the Obo army? They are the warriors that fight for the land. They are the ones that fight for the land. This is the next slide. We have Obo Abaru and other Obo. So the research focuses on their roles as peace setters of the community, either as an entity or in collaboration with other institutions of the land. The institutions I told you, the Omona, the Umuada, and the priest. Then the role of maintaining peace in the land comes in different ways, such as war. They use war to bring peace. They use trading to bring peace, punishment, and negotiation. What I mean by war, Islam people, they are known for their, skill. They have skilled warriors. They fight very well. Even till present, they are still fighting even among themselves. So they fight very well. So with that, they use it. If you don't want it in a negotiation way, they'll give you war. If you don't want it through war, you say it's by trading, exchange of things, they will exchange. So all those things, they make use of it to maintain peace, just to make sure that their community is safe. They don't want any intruder. Then the influence of colonialism and systemically on the age grade has always been felt in the community as there are high levels of development carried out by them. The truth is that when these colonial officers, when they came around in Izaland, it wasn't easy for them to accept, something that they don't really know about. But with time, they were able to, they fought harder for it, colonialism took over. And with that, they were able to gain some education and a lot of things. But in the contemporary time, these age grade now, they are now building roads, assisting the government in addressing some issues regarding their well-being and a lot of things. And while discussing with some of the youths there, based from the interaction, they used to say government give them, some things that they use to help to organize the community, to take care of the community. Then it's also important to note that despite the challenges of colonialism, modernity, age-grade system in Izaland survived, and they are still active in their respective groups in line with the modern world. This is the next system. The age grade as an institution under the traditional authority of Izaland, they played crucial roles in maintaining unity amongst members, families, and villages. They have true negotiations, wars, intermarriage, sustained relationship with their neighbors, all for the benefit of the people. However, many aspects of this age grade system remained the same, especially the initiation part. Some other things, due to colonialism, Christianity, and others, in some things, they dropped some things, that's in the past. But this initiation, you must be initiated before you are regarded as an age grade member. Then the roles, especially as agent of peace in the community, remains still. Then regarding the question of gender complementarity, in Izaland, they have the female sector and they have the male sector of this age grade. They are not combined. And the reason being that they believe that the female, that they'll get married and leave, but the males, they are the ones that stay, they are the custodians, the people that hold first the traditions, you understand? And as regards to that, the females are not really initiated as what they think as the main initiation. They are not really initiated into that, but they carry out all other responsibilities as an age grade. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chinechere. You have given us some extra time, which is very good, and given us a very clear analysis and presentation that raises some very important points. Like the first speaker, your work is on conflict resolution, but it's refreshing in the sense that you are addressing indigenous mechanisms, indigenous agents. Some people would even go as far as say that your paper falls within the framework of indigenous peace building, which is a growing area, which means that even though you tell me that you are not a doctor, you have an entire future of a rich research area that you can grow and excel in. And that would be my humble opinion. I would also say you raised something about gender complementarity, which is perhaps a concept that you will need to unpack further in the question and answer session. Otuogbo, as you have described, you may also actually, you have several topics in your topic. Otuogbo, the gender relations within Otuogbo can actually become a PhD thesis on its own, beyond even the paper that you have presented. But I'll stop here in the interest of time, only to thank you for giving us such an interesting paper. Now it's my responsibility, of course, just to say a bit more that your paper also falls within the purview of Professor Okome's work on gender relations, on ethnicity, and also on international relations and peace building. So again, although she's not sitting next to you, I am sure that she's going to search you out after this session. Thank you. Next to present is Olusegun Oladele Idowu of Afe Babalola University. And he also is in the area of traditional and indigenous peace building and security studies. The title of his work is Traditional Security, Unpacking the Narratives of Indigenous Security Mechanisms in Mojubaland. Is it Dr. Idowu? You have the floor. Is Dr. Idowu with us? Dr. Idowu, please.
Network issues.
Oh, it has technology-related issues. Okay. Okay, then I would pause and wait until he or she is ready.
We have the next person, and when the results.
What are you suggesting? I can't hear you well.
I'm suggesting that maybe we should have the next person until
Is the next,
Dr. Idowu.
is the next person ready?
Who's the next person? Dr. Abiola, are you present?
Is
The
Jude
next person
EK.
is
Jude
not.
EK. The next person is Jude EKG. Okay, I will wait and see what happens.
Yeah. Okay, which is first. We have to work on this internet. We can do it. We need a backbone, like we did. A backbone, underwater area that will control ourselves. Depending on. So, Dr. I'm just wondering, maybe there are all these challenges, if we can just discuss the ones. And then when challenges are resolved, you know.
Well, I don't know. Is EKG ready or is Kennedy Eboka ready? These are the other people.
Kennedy Eboka is here.
Oh, come now.
That's the last person.
Yes.
Oh, no.
You were silent.
No, I thought we were talking about Jim. I was hearing Jim.
Kennedy Eboka, are you ready to speak to the people?
Yes, I am ready, bro.
Very good. Are you presenting?
Yes, thank you.
Wow.
Kennedy, are you presenting alone or with Esther?
I'm presenting alone. Esther is actually here present to applaud us.
And Esther, can you please join the speaker? You are both co-authors.
Okay. So I should stand beside him. I'm seated here, Prof. Sure.
Okay, thank you for assuring me. Now, let me usher you in.
The people online want to see. So
The next speakers, it's a co-authored paper by Kennedy Eboka and Esther Tonte. And the title of their paper, I have a different title from what I'm seeing here, but I will read what is online. Rethinking Ethnicity as the Entry Point of Conflicts Involving Ethnic Enclaves in Nigerian Cities. Insights from Narratives of Enclave Members in Idiaraba, Lagos. Okay, then, Kennedy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Prof. And may I also respond to the issue of what you haven't been a little different from what we have. Because of teasing out content, and we are thinking that the paper should go with this title in order to, come up with what we are talking about, the focus of the paper. So the title we are going with is Rethinking Ethnicity as the Entry Point of Conflicts Involving Ethnic Enclaves in Nigerian Cities. Insight from narrative of enclave members in India. So we begin by asking ourselves first, what is ethnic enclaves? Okay. What exactly do we mean by ethnic enclave? So we look at ethnic enclave as opposed to co-residence, an area in those communities where people of the same ethnic origin are concentrated and tend to promote some corresponding cultural, commercial, and institutional identities. So the problem with this is often people think that the concentration of people of the same ethnic group in a particular city
can become a source of serious concern that can trigger some level of anti-migrant sentiment that, if not properly managed, can lead to conflicts. But then let's even ask ourselves how are enclaves formed? Well, literature also there that one of the ways of steps towards formation of ethnic enclave is through cultural connection. Where people want to go to where they have people of their ethnic group in order to have privileged access to labor force, and also as a result of insecurity that is somehow pervasive in most of our cities. The other point is that bridges the gap between the state and the individual. That is to say, especially in societies where state institutions fail to live up to their civil responsibility of protecting lives and properties of the citizenry. I think Professor Okome had touched on this in some of her papers, especially if you look at the contesting the Nigerian state, civil society, and the contradictions of self-organization. Then she was clear about how state failure has given rise to people always trying to rely on independent or self-defense processes. Then we also have the issue of chain migration as a process of enclave formation. That is to say, people bringing their people from the villages or rural areas to the cities, and then serving as a shield where there is a sense or high sense of insecurity. Now, what does literature say about ethnic enclave? Like we have mentioned earlier, in ethnically conscious societies and cities, ethnic enclave is often viewed with a sense of concern. Both enclave members and host community. So there is this sentiment, oh, these people have come to occupy our land, they have come to dominate us, they have come to take job opportunity that are right to do. So it becomes a serious concern where this is not managed. Then we also have evidence of people talking about spatial concentration of migrants tend to hinder social cohesion. If conflict must be mitigated in society, especially in cities, I think the need for cohesion and mutual, trust is very important. But then they are saying that ethnic enclave can limit the tendency for this kind of social cohesion. They will have increases in the sense of distance from mainstream society, which tend to diminish the prospect of mutual trust, like I initially mentioned. Then enclave also is seen as a mobility trial. It has assumed that as people continue to confine themselves in the enclave, the likelihood of moving even across the social mobility from the down to the top, economic-wise, political-wise, to be restricted. As it's assumed that they operate only within the enclave. These are some of the pronouncements that literature talked about regarding enclave, and that the dominant narrative is that conflict and violence involving ethnic enclave in cities in Africa is usually as a result of the existence of enclave. It is this submission that prompted the impetus for this title, that we should retain whether the existence of an ethnic enclave in a city really is sufficient to provoke or trigger conflicts. It is for that reason that we are bringing up this subject. So what's the problem? The question of how conflicts are sparked in migrant ethnic enclave and why certain ethnic enclaves and enclave economies are the object of urban violent conflicts have not been properly answered. It's true that they have documented issue of being a threat to the community as the community conceives it as such. And sometimes you hear people are fighting these people. Literature is not clear as to the tipping point, to use a concept in the literature, as to when the disagreement moved and transited into all-kind conflict. We also have the notion that conflicts involving ethnic enclave, have is sparked. Some have said it's because of the feeling of anti-migrant sentiments. Because people believe that migrants are using up their resources, and this from time to time tend to swell sentiment that can lead to, directing aggression and act of violence against perceived migrants, especially those dwelling in the enclave. But there is a counter reaction to this submission, because from certain definitions of conflict, there is a segment that highlights the importance of antagonistic encounter. And where this thing is missing, it is difficult to conclude that feeling can lead to conflict. In general, the study aims to explore the conflict trajectory and understand the entry point of conflicts involving migrant ethnic entry and how this point evolved into collective conflicts and violence. So how does conflict move from the entry point to perhaps the tipping point up to the ending? Because literature does not suggest that enclave or ethnic enclave is the original spark, or to use the word, or trigger of conflict. So what are those things? What are those micro foundations or street level sources of conflict? This has always been neglected. So the study was actually qualitative and participatory. Here we have, this is during the time of the field study. And let me also mention that this study is a part of an ongoing study or study we just concluded around Africa, around 3 countries in Africa, Uganda, Nigeria, and Ethiopia. So this component is from the data that we generated from Idiaraba that focus on ethnicity, conflict, especially where enclave is involved. Then narrative analysis was utilized to make meaning from the data from which we tease out connections and themes that enabled us to explain what we saw. So being a qualitative study, we moved from data to theories and themes rather than moving as so in a predetermined approach. We came up with some extracts of narrative from the participants from where we pick out meanings that will help us to understand how conflict moves from the entry point to the tipping point along the chain of conflict to enclave. In other words, it is very difficult to point to enclave as the origin of conflict. So there are some factors that tend to mobilize conflict sentiment that leads to spread conflict within the enclave. So we have brought out some narrative that helped us to generate some themes with which we were able to explain factors that actually work together to create conflicts within enclave. One, we saw the poor social adaptation. This thing is not quite clear, but if you look at the narrative of one of the participants, he said, for instance, I saw the Hausa running across. They said they have committed something. I saw Yoruba guys running with guns, moving around the area. This is from the experience that they had earlier, where they were subject of violence by host community or those who see them as interlopers within their community. So the narrative suggests that this conflict did not originate from the enclave, but the enclave became the field on which the violence was played out. So he said, we saw the outside guy running across. They said they have committed something. I saw Yoruba guys with guns moving around the area. Those that committed those things were not residents here, though they are houses. You see the interconnection between ethnicity. Now, it started when a Hausa man, at what point did conflicts originate? He gave this narrative that suggests that it originated outside the enclave, even though enclave appears to be the field where this conflict played out. For instance, he said it started when a Hausa man from Kano went to pass excavator at a dump site and hit the Yoruba guy after a short misunderstanding arising from payment of money for passing excavator. One, I can find 2 things from here. Lack of public facilities that enable migrants to have access to use public facilities. I think Professor Okome had also mentioned that, and she said in one of her books, Contesting the Nigerian State, Civil Society, and the Contradiction of Self-Organizing, that the government is not even willing to finance public facilities. I think I agree with that, but it's difficult to see whether it is lack of unwillingness or lack of resources. Then they moved on to look at how the Hausa tend to remobilize to counter the, onslaught of those who are antagonizing. In any case, we came up with about 3 things. One is poor social adaptation and lack of street etiquette and culture, coupled with absence of public facilities, in this case, toilet. So we learned from Anderson that street culture is very important in an area, especially when you are a stranger. That's street etiquette. We have to learn the language of people because we're wondering if the initial encounter were to be from the same ethnic group, 2 ethnic groups were those who were involved in the initial, perhaps the conflict would have been minimized. But to the end that ethnicity was introduced and became an intensifier in this case, it moved and transited from the outside world, outside from enclave to enclave, as it were. Then we also saw the game or the fact of ethnic solidarity sentiment, and then social ethnic defense program. Social ethnic self-defense agents, which Professor Okome has pointed out robustly in some of our work, that people take to self-defense, but organizing this self-defense is a problem. But then let us even ask, why self-defense in the first place? Because of government failure, as it were. So what are our findings? One is the data suggests that conflicts involving ethnic enclaves tend to originate from factors external or outside to the entity. And the idea that the mere presence of ethnic enclave triggers conflict is without finance. That the roles of poor social adaptation, integration, especially street etiquette, street culture, and absence of public facilities is also evident. Then here we saw social adaptation has to do with the knowledge of street culture, the use of street wisdom and street etiquette, which consists of a set of informal rules among residents and other users of public spaces, which allow members of diverse groups to share the streets. Here we found out from Anderson 2006. The conflict only escalates when ethnicity means incompatible tensions, resembling what Moser and Rogers described as the tipping points. So it's like when two people who belong to the same ethnic group and they disagree, the potential for disagreement to move from disagreement to conflict is minimal. So ethnicity only comes in as a secondary factor and then there's fire, not necessarily because there's an ethnic group in a particular area. So we also say ethnic solidarity. In sociological studies, solidarity is used to describe social bonds on the basis of cultural norms, of familiar or group obligation among people. So you see people having problem or arguments. Then others coming to join on the basis of their affiliation to a certain group. You see one person belongs to maybe an outside person fighting the Yoruba person. Without understanding or trying to understand what the issues are. Because they feel that it's their obligation to fight for their ethnic group, you see the expressions of what ethnic solidarity. We also saw the importance or role of self-defense agents. In some cases, those who trigger this conflict may not even be the one or the two soldiers to implement or execute the conflict against specific opponent. As a result of state failure, as had already been established in the literature, almost all ethnic groups appear to be coming with a self-defense group. You have this OC, you have YDC, you have MAGs, you have IWAREPA. And when a group, a member of their group is having a problem, they find it as their, function, as their role to come in defense of their ethnic group. So we saw the role of self-defense. So that is to say, if African cities or urban areas must experience permanent peace, though we are contended in the notion of permanent peace, dealing with these subgroups is very, very essential. Then we conclude by saying, when discrimination on the basis of ethnicity is not a matter of state policy. Yes, there are countries where discrimination is a matter of state policy, like we have in apartheid South Africa, or in the past in the United States where you are talking about racism. So when discrimination on the basis of ethnicity is not a matter of state policy, ethnicity is not the express cause of ethnic conflicts. Ethnicity can only act as the intensifier, not the entry point. This means the state is not playing its role effectively as a mediator whenever there is ethnic conflict. Thank you for your opinion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kennedy Ebuka, for presenting us with a paper that explores what I would consider to be the special dimension of ethnic conflict, focusing on the case of what you describe as ethnic enclaves. It's very interesting, and we hope that in the Q&A, you will probably shed light on the evolution of that particular enclave from which you have drawn your study. Like the papers before you, you have also explored ethnic conflict. I wouldn't say that the paper has gone as far as looking at mediation and peacemaking and peace building, although you do indict the state for not being able to effectively mediate these kind of ethnic conflicts. But the key takeaway really is the role of ethnicity as an intensifier, but not as the root or the main trigger of conflict. I think this is a brilliant piece. I hope we would also hear a bit more from the co-author during the Q&A. And on this note, thank you once again for a very interesting and rigorous presentation. I now want to ask if Olusegun Oladele Idowu is in the room. I can't hear your answer. Is Dr. Olusegun Oladele Idowu in the room?
It's online.
He said he had an emergency.
So he's online. Okay,
Yes.
I see he's muted.
Okay.
All right. In that case, I would invite Olusegun Oladele Idowu of Babalola University to quickly present his paper on traditional security, unpacking the narratives of indigenous security mechanisms in Mojubaland. Olusegun, can you kindly unmute yourself and make your presentation in 12 minutes?
I said he has an emergency. He's in restaurant transit. But the problem is he's still here, so we don't know.
Maybe he's listening, but he can't talk.
He has left.
He didn't leave.
All right. In that case, may I call the next
He has an emergency.
Oh, family emergency.
Okay.
So tell
He has a family.
so please tell Dr. Obi, because he can't.
No, I've seen the message he sent. He sent
Okay.
a message already that he has a family emergency. But in this case, it is now my duty to call on the next person, Dr. Judy KG, to present on conflict of institutional reforms and identity reconstruction in Africa. Is Judy KG in the room? Well, I don't hear any response, so we should just go straight to the question and answer session. So thank you very much. Now, members of the distinguished audience, you have heard 3 very interesting presentations. A lot of them focusing on ethnicity, but also one looking at indigenous conflict resolution. May I have people ask questions? All you have to do is to indicate. I can hear all of you in the room. Indicate and ask your question. Say your name, your affiliation, and ask your questions. Thank you. You now have the floor. I see Professor Sarah Sally indicating. Can you please go ahead and ask your question? You can identify yourself, even though I have identified you.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. I'm Professor Obi. Sarah Sally from Makerere University, Gender Studies and Identities. My question is about why and if it's possible for us to think about ethnicity as distinct from politics. When you look at the communities that make up Africa, before colonialism, these communities were not just social communities. They were political entities, in as much as they were economic entities, and they were social entities. The kingdoms that were based on ethnicity were actually the source of all, they were integrated. And yet I heard from the first presenter that probably ethnic associations should go back to focusing on social things. My question, is this possible and is it desirable that actually what were bases of political power should be now rethought about as social entities? And the second one is why we problematize ethnicity in politics in Africa and not ethnicity or any other social identifiers in other parts of the world. where you are, if there's going to be an election, we want to see how much the Hispanics are going to do that, what the Blacks are going to do, what the Catholics, what the Anglicans, what the Muslims. All these social categories are the basis of political organizing, political mobilization, and political predictions. But when we come to Africa, we then want to see it as a problem. Even if we are to talk about Kennedy's position of ethnic enclaves, it's natural that people go where they will get a social support system. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, except when they get maybe anxiety and others who attack them. So mainly my question in brief is, can we think of, is it possible for ethnicity to exist without the political in a place like Africa, where it has always been the basis of political and socioeconomic organizing historically? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It appears to me that you are asking two very critical questions, conceptual and probably operational. And I would say that there are two people you have mentioned. One is Abiodun Adejumo, and the other one is a paper by Kennedy Eboka and Esther Thonte. I would ask them to respond to your question.
Okay, I think the question directed to me is it possible for us to, is it not possible to have,
Is it possible and is it desirable?
to revert back?
No, to delete ethnicity and ethnic organizations from politics.
As it stands, it's very difficult because the elite of these ethnic groups make the ruling elite at the same time. So in most of the time, they are meant to use measures and policies in place to mitigate ethnic affiliation to political parties, to politics and the likes. But most of the time, they want to, the ruling elites themselves weaponize ethnicity. They weaponize it in order to be able to gather support.
And for me, I'm saying that's not a problem. Because that is the basis of social
That's
organization.
It's not a problem. I mean, it's a problem because it was, it wasn't really.
I should explain what you mean by weaponization.
No, I understand it.
No. I think, well, so sometimes we use terms and we mean different things. I would like to actually know what exactly is this weaponization?
The weaponization I'm referring to here is the fact that whenever there is, whenever the ruling elite want to get to power, they revert back to their ethnic group. They make use of them to get to power.
Yeah.
So they weaponize ethnicity.
But Trump will go back to his point category.
Yeah.
So with the Republican vote.
Yeah.
And we don't see that as a problem. But when the Yoruba Igbo man goes back to these people to organize politically, we see a problem.
Okay, can I just say something? So I think
This is becoming very interesting, but I will allow the conversation to go on, please.
allow me. So I think what I observe happening is the exercise of hegemony by the elites who convince the subaltern classes that their interest is the interest of the general group that they claim to represent. However, those, the way in which things play out, they're actually only representing themselves. But when the resources come, they appropriate it, they kleptocratize it, and they also, in some cases, want to make this into a dynastic entitlement.
That happens like
So this is a bit different from making a claim on the basis of the relationship with the community and then getting those resources and ensuring that at least a critical mass of the population that the elite claims to represent has access. I'm not saying everybody gets access, but a critical mass just gets access.
I understand you. The problem is we should think broader.
So I think, if we think about AK's work on the primordial public and the civic public, with colonization and then this kind of strategic expediency that motivates the elite, they distort the old ways in order to access power and they use the discourses of representation to capture power. While, so they're saying they're representing the people and the people themselves, so I see hegemony, they gain hegemony because a lot of people that gain nothing become cannon fodder even.
I totally agree with everything I've said. My problem is only problematizing it for Nigeria and not for elsewhere.
Oh, okay.
Because even if the US are
yeah.
then you end up with many white folks falling through the cracks. So
Okay. At this point, the chairperson would intervene to say, this is a very lively debate, but we'll need time for Kennedy. Well, you see, Dr. Adejumo, you see what you have caused. What this means is two things. The first is that your paper is very interesting and provocative. However, I think you should pay attention to the question of whether you can actually delink ethnicity from politics. That is a very important question. And from the lively debate, I think you have your work cut out for you when you are revising the paper for publication. The key issue is the role of ethnic associations and whether they can actually realistically delink from the politics of the day, given the role of ethnicity in the construction and reproduction of hegemony. But I'll stop there. Kennedy Eboka, you have not escaped.
Possible to have more questions, given the time. There are two people.
Yes, but Eboka would need to respond.
Okay, Prof.
Yes, he thinks he has escaped.
Yeah, the question that Prof. raised is whether ethnicity can exist without the politics, something like that. I think really, like have been pointed out in the literature, it depends on if the political state, the political elite, they are ready to manage ethnicity in such a way that it will benefit our political system. It will be something that will benefit the society. Sometimes you see people who are into ethnic politics, study or scholarship, you observe that they do make reference to leaders like the Nyerere and the Nkrumah, how they were able to manage their ethnic group, even though they are a multi-ethnic society, without having the kind of problem that Nigeria had during the time of the Civil War. Because the thinking was that somebody like Nyerere, for instance, he did not mobilize ethnicity as it were. But here down in Nigeria, we saw the leaders of different ethnic groups trying to go back to the ethnic enclaves to mobilize them for ethnic, people. So that is, it is possible. It depends on the political state. It depends on the political power elite. Today, I think they are engineering Rwanda, and it's almost becoming, unexpected to use certain words in public space. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Now we'll have to take more questions. Thank you so much. I see a man in red raising his hands. Please identify yourself and ask your question and say your affiliation and who you are asking, who you are posing the question to.
Thank you, Prof. My pleasure meeting you, Cyril. I've been hearing, I've read so much of your work, but today I have opportunity to see you live. I'm so glad. My name is Akubo Aduku from former State University, now Prince Abakaudo University. I'm from the Department of Political Science. I'm a lecturer there. First, I want to appreciate our speaker on the second speaker, it is great. And I want to appreciate you for the wonderful presentation, quite exciting and informative. But I want to ask one question. Is there a gender bias? Is there a gender disparity? Because there was an issue you raised there that the women are not really carried along, or there's a special provision for them in the age grade arrangement. Please, I need you to clear that, please. Then the last speaker, you are talking about ethnicity as a conflict intensifier, if I get you right. And you are making a claim that ethnicity alone cannot generate conflict, but it can only intensify conflict. But over time, we have seen ethnic identity is a major factor that even generates conflicts. How do we reconcile this in your presentation? If you are saying you are laying claim to the fact that ethnic enclave and ethnicity can only intensify conflict, is it that ethnicity is not a causative factor for conflict? Are you extracting ethnicity from on its own trying to generate conflict or having a tendency to generate conflict? Or is just to intensify conflict? Then where is the place of the quest for identity and the crisis that comes with it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see a gentleman in brown. I saw somebody behind the lady in black raise his hands. Have you changed your mind?
Oh, so Dr. Sarah, Dr. Esther.
Esther, no, maybe I
Want to? Why don't you let Dr. Esther also respond?
I actually mentioned this in my opening remarks, but she has decided to exercise her right to silence.
Polite. And I'm rude, so
yeah, she has decided to exercise her right to silence. Have you changed your mind now?
So she's being polite. Can you please allow her?
Go ahead. Then we'll go back to the gentleman in brown. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Prof. I appreciate this privilege, sir. First and foremost, I would like to say that it will be very difficult to dissociate ethnicity from politics, as well as dissociating the politics of land from ethnicity. Yes, now the issue is, okay, we have just presented that the enclave is just an intensifier, it's not a driver. Most times when you see conflicts happening in a particular environment or society, it could be as a result of economic resources or most times land. And all this issue of ethnicity is about land. When there's conflict, oh, you have migrated to my society, so why will you dominate me? And so we find a bit of politics and ethnicity in it. So we cannot dissociate politics from ethnicity or ethnicity from politics. It's very, very complex. That's just my observation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Esther, for sharing your perspective. We'll now go to the gentleman in brown who raised his hands earlier. Please identify yourself, ask your question, and tell us your affiliation.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to the presenters. My question goes to Kenneth. My name is Dominic. I'm from the University of Ibadan. My question goes to Kenneth Ebuka. I think is it not better to use the strata, the status of individuals in this ethnic enclave? Because I have been around this Idiaraba, I have noticed their clashes. Whenever there will be a clash, it involves a certain level of individuals, a certain strata. Maybe I don't want to use the word miscreants, but these are the level where it starts. And these people know themselves, they relate, they interrelate. Why the rich ones or the people ones also interrelate? But whenever there is a maybe misunderstanding between one, maybe they will keep it until when it reaches a boiling pot or when something triggers it, then they will now take the fight to themselves. And when there is casualty, is those strata that will be involved. If there will be burning of the house, it is the house of the poor. If anybody should die, it will be the poor. It will not involve the rich. So when you are now using the ethnicity, knowing fully well that most of the conflicts affect a certain strata. So me, I'm thinking it should be brought at that level. I don't know if I'm able to.
Difficult to
Thank
read.
you very much, Dominic. You have raised an important point about identities and social classes and the way this finds expression uh, at different levels and even within ethnic enclaves. So this is a direct question to Kennedy and Esther. Esther, do you want to take the lead?
Can I add a rider? Or maybe not a rider. You know, I want to say, ask the questioner and the answerers to consider whether what Dominic is asking is particular to this ethnic situation, or it's a general problem with conflict. Because the rich, actually, I don't know any places where the rich suffer to the extent, or the affluent suffer to the extent that the poor suffer. The poor tend to also be the foot soldiers, and even in contemporary conflicts, like when the US went to fight wars in Iraq and all these places, it's the children of new immigrants, it's mostly poor people that suffer casualties. And one Congress person actually mentioned that he was the only person who had a child, the only Congress person that had a child that went to fight those wars that George Bush perpetrated. But when you also look at this, it has implications for immigrants. A lot of our children are so proud to become members of the American military forces because it's going to get them green card. So, and then Russia is also recruiting on those bases. Even Ukraine is recruiting on those bases. So, can we generalize a bit and not just particularize to what happens in the ethnic conflicts?
Thank you very much. Kennedy and Esther, can you kindly respond? And any other person that wants to respond.
Thank you, Prof. I would like to respond to the first last question before. Then to whether I think you are just wanting to another dimension to be that you get from the perspective of strata or individual strata. And if you look at it, we are actually be thinking of considering it at street level. Something like accounting for the street level or micro level of conflicts involving this kind of things, because it can generate from there. But like Prof pointed out, sometimes generally this is just the diamond. Not that your concern, for instance, about always involving the children of those at the lower level of society, it appears to be a general thing. But then it's a new perspective that would like to explore the data to see how they interrelate. Then with reference to this question on how it's possible to say that it's not conflict that is causing conflict involving, it's not ethnicity that is generating conflicts involving ethnic. Yeah, I can say that perhaps it has to do with the context. You may have a dimension or context where conflict, being an ethnic member exposes you. But where I say, and it appears that the data is converging to demonstrate that the fact of being one person does not just bring about conflict, that it must originate from somewhere. Something comes and then conflict becomes an intensifier as it were. That you as a single person, if these things are properly managed, especially using things like a local conflict management mechanisms, before it transits to the level where it becomes all full-fledged conflict, this is minimal. So that's why we are contending, I think we want to have in the data that conflict involving ethnic enclave in this context has an external origin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Probably one way of approaching this is to look at the people you spoke to and whether you are able to identify the actors in conflict and categorize them in terms of their socioeconomic class. If you are able to do this, probably you will be able to use the same data that you collected and analyzed to answer the question as to whether it's the poor that are the, permit me to use the term, cannon fodder in conflicts. Can you shed some light on whether your research was able to categorize conflict actors in terms of their socioeconomic status?
Okay, can I also add a bit something to that and say, how about gender? Is there any kind of different like expression of violence or non-violence? Based on gender, that's not the only thing. The other thing is what is at stake. Shouldn't we consider what is at stake and then who benefits when we're looking into eruptions of conflicts? You know, does that make a difference? Or just anything like somebody went to defecate because it's wahala? How about, you know, when it is a contestation about whose land it is and who is the interloper, you know? So are there different levels of conflict, you know, based on what is at stake? And then, you know, somebody made this statement that maybe there's been things that are percolating, maybe that's it you. Things are percolating and then, you know, people make use of a catalyst to then let out frustrations that they have been feeling. And then, you know, can we tie it to what Precious said, that, you know, are there organized things? So people are there in enclaves, do things like age grade and all these things follow them so that it can act as mediating factors when there are conflicts. So what kind of institutions do people bring with them or retain? And then do they use them in the same ways as their original manifestation?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Precious. That is directed to you. Can you say something about that?
No, I'm just saying Precious gave us a very wonderful.
Yes, that's why I'm asking her to speak. I will come back to Esther.
Okay, I understood the question from the question asked. It's possible to say something that there a gender bias for disparities. Okay, from what I explained and from what I've explored during the research, that the females are treated differently. That's not the truth. When it comes to that age grade, there are some things the male folk do and the females don't. And then I said earlier that when it comes to the initiation aspect, it's only the males that are being initiated into that, like the cult or something. But the females are not because of their belief system. We believe that the females, at some point, they will get married and leave. But every other small minor responsibilities and some responsibilities, the females carry it out, but there are some separate, because there are rituals binding the culture. Yes, it's not just normal, that's how it is. So I don't know if I.
So then to what extent? To what extent then are we going to say that there's complementarity? Because obviously there is difference in terms of access to power, in terms of prestige, and also in terms of being seen as potential peacemakers. And yet people always talk about women being peacemakers.
Well, I think from what I discovered too, when it comes to peacemaking and all these things, they might involve them based on the lower level. You understand? Then, and I discovered that apart from Ebonyi State, there is this, what's his name, but actually other states, they have the female and the males are together. Do you understand? So, my own study is basically on exactly. So, in other aspects, other places, I think they also have that kind of joint complement, but I know there will still be a difference among them, especially they are together. Yes, so that's my concern.
Thank you.
Can I
Thank you.
have?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I am from Igbo land, and I understand what she's trying to say, but the way to explain it, we also have a group we call Umuada.
Yeah,
She talked about
Yes, Umuada is the strongest, even among the age grade. So, because if Umuada should come and decide and say this is what will stand, nobody can change that. So, if it comes to power and authority, Umuada has kind of stronger power than some of the age grade or something like that. So, all the female, whether they are old or when they get married, they now choose into the Umuada, and from that Umuada, nobody can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for clarifying that point. I think that the research on age grade and gender relations within age grade systems is something that is refreshing, it is new, and I think it will raise some important questions that the presenter should look at. And her response also made me to think about comparative studies. You can actually do comparative studies on this within Igbo land and even across the Niger to other enclaves, permit me to use the term, of Igbo people who are not in the eastern part of the country. And you can then do comparative analysis and actually theorize on gender relations within age grade systems. That would be a fantastic study. But I am not allowed as the chairman to say this, but it's just something to think about. Esther, you are supposed to respond to something on ethnicity. Are you ready now?
Yes, Prof.
Please
Yes,
go ahead.
on the issue of socioeconomic status of the people in the ethnic enclave, well, the data we collected, we didn't analyze to show that, probably it was the poor who are instigators, but from the Idiaraba enclave that we actually surveyed, there are a lot of educated houses there. And the subtle thing causing tension is about territoriality. Like, if you know the Idiaraba very well, it's a very large expanse of land. And so there's this subtle tension that how can a northerner from, the northern part come and take so much expanse of land. And so there's that subtle tension that causes conflict every now and then. So I think what they did in that particular enclave is to have different section of group. They have the women group, they have the youth group who maintains peace in the environment. And so they have their Sariki, which is their Obas. And so the Oba in that particular enclave liaise with the Oba, the Yoruba Oba at Lawansin and Mushin area. So when there are issues, the Sariki in the Hausa enclave will call on to the Yoruba Oba and say, there's a particular issue, how do we resolve it? And through that, they've been resolving their issues amicably. So I just think it's an issue of territoriality.
Thank you, Esther. You just created a new issue area for your research. That is conflict resolution. So you have just told us how those conflicts are being resolved, probably not telling us about the socioeconomic dimension, which you say is not part of your study, but it's also going to be interesting about how those conversations take place within the ethnic groups that occupy that space in the urban setting. That will be another interesting study. And I hope that you and your co-author will be ready to explore this further. May I ask if there are any other questions? We have 2 minutes left. Is there anybody there that has not asked any question? There is this lady behind Sarah Sally.
Yes, there's a lady. I think you have a question.
Behind Sarah Sally, can we please hear your perspectives on the papers that you have listened to this morning? Identify yourself and your affiliation.
I'm Snow Olufunke, and welcome by the potential graduate students, but I'm not into political sciences. I'm I'm really into food sciences. Wow. But I'm here to honor my auntie as I'm our children.
Yeah.
My own papers I found very interesting last week. Talking about ethnic resolution. So now, what I just need clarity on is the street culture and the lifestyle. What do you mean in terms of the street culture now? You know, my own idea of our people is quite how would I put it now? It's quite it's quite different. Is I see them as like what Mr. Dominic said, as miscreants. So what other aspect of the Idiaba ethnic enclave would you share light on?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you very much for your question. Can you have a quick response? We are running out of time.
All right, thank you. The notion of street culture was actually donated by Anderson, an American sociologist, where she thought that it's impossible to do away with certain subgroups, subculture in the system. And that what you can do to navigate that field is to understand the street etiquette that you can use. Like, for instance, if I'm going to maybe pass away somewhere, if there are no public facilities, and people there go, oh, I say, this is street culture that can help navigate the conflict area. But you could just be surprised that this simple thing, if not properly managed, can escalate. That is what we are saying. So street culture, street wisdom, street etiquette can be deployed as mechanism for managing street sources of conflict.
Thank you very much. Before I close, I want to just share some advice. I noticed that in a lot of the presentations, scholars tend to cite non-African works. There is something called the politics of citation. We need to cite each other. We need to cite African theorists. That is something that I think we need to do. By reproducing knowledges produced outside of Africa and passing them on as authoritative, I think that we are doing injustice to some of the African scholars, like the panelists, like the scholar who we are celebrating here, who put in so much work and sacrifice. You also need to cite each other, because this really counts in the politics of citation. It counts in ranking of your work. So please, I appeal to you once again. There are scholars, African scholars, who have theorized peace, conflict, ethnicity, and a lot of the phenomena that you are using as the foundational pillars of your work. Search them out and cite them. Africa has a lot to contribute to global knowledge production. The point at which to start is from here. And Lagos Studies Association has a key role, and is indeed playing a key role, by bringing all of you together to help in this crusade. And on this note, I want to thank our distinguished panelists. I want to thank Dr. Abiodun Adejumo, Precious Chinecherem Idemadu, as well as Kennedy Eboka and Esther Tonte, for their very, very rich and very brilliant analysis. I also want to thank the organizers, as well as Professor Okome, for not just being an innocent bystander, but intervening at every point to make sure that she puts her views across. I wish you a very lovely evening in Nigeria, and I say thank you again for your kind attention, and goodbye.
Now, can I say something? Politics of citation. I call it politics of knowledge. And it is something that I think we need to take more attention to. Because we act as if we are just like baby scholars, and then those dead white men and dead living white people. Maybe that they are more intelligent than us. Yes, we do a lot of really useful work. So let's be more aware that it is important that what you are doing, each one of you is creating, is contributing to knowledge. And so we should keep talking each other's work, you know, when it is useful, and act as if we are real scholars and not just like we are the ones that they're dragging along. Because a lot of people also use our work, even when they don't attribute it to us. So don't let's do it to ourselves. Our work is useful and it's important. And I really applaud you all. And I hope to see your work in print, all these papers. Thank you.